Welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Alison Ho and I am a sound designer at Riot Games. And my lovely co-host, I think she's this way, is Kristen Quinn, the audio director of PolyArt Games. So yeah, we wanted to join all of you and talk about like the different ways and paths that we got into the games industry and setting some expectations about the format to start with. We're going to have some of our own personal stories of how we got into the game industry. And then after that, we're hoping to open the conversation to all of you and take any questions from the chat and have an open dialogue back and forth of whatever you all would like to know and talk about. So yeah, I guess, Kristen, could you start us off with your own story?
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. It's really great to get to share stories and listen to other people's experiences getting into the games industry. It's always really helped me understand how to help others get in too. For me personally, I got into the industry about over 15 years ago. I had not thought about game audio as a career, actually. I had started out mostly doing music production in school. And I went to the Art Institute in Seattle for a couple years and graduated and tried to get out and find a job in actually doing music production work. I kind of struggled and had a bit of a hard time, got rejected from a lot of music studios. And then moved to kind of try and get into radio and go more into broadcasting. Also just looking for internships and anything I could do. Kind of didn't land anything there either. And then I decided to go back to school in hopes of expanding maybe more multimedia education and maybe broadening my horizons outside of just audio. Needless to say, I ended up at the Evergreen State College at that point for 2 more years to finish my bachelor's. I didn't end up studying anything else outside of audio because that's where my passion is. And as much as I went in mindfully trying to expand my education, I definitely stayed focused on audio. But I got way more exposure to doing more sound design. I worked at the college doing live setups and things of that nature. But one of the instructors there helped me find, since I had struggled so much getting into even an internship at a music studio, helped me find an internship with a game company, and that was Monolith Productions. And so my last quarter in college, I ended up starting an internship there, mostly focused around ripping our CD libraries at the time into digital format and adding them into databases so we could actually search metadata for sounds. But before that, people were literally going through, like looking up in a book, pulling sounds off CDs and ripping the sound they needed for their session. It was a very different world. After I was at Monolith for 4 years, I kind of found a designer there who his name was Christopher Melroth. He had a lot of experience. He was at multiple studios, and he really kind of started showing me the ropes. He knew I loved video games. I mean, when I grew up in an arcade practically. I was in a bowling alley 5 nights a week with my parents in Texas. So I always had a love for video games, and he recognized that, and so he really started just showing me and teaching me how game audio worked, how games were built, and he really turned into an amazing mentor for me, and he's continued to be an amazing mentor for me throughout my entire career. I was at Monolith for 4 years, working on the first year I was there, we ended up shipping 3 games in 1 year. So it was kind of a very big crash course in what it meant to make audio for games. And I went from ripping sounds off libraries really to him slowly giving me more and more things to do, like how to design sounds and actually implement them into the game engine, starting with how to tag sounds on animations, how do you hook up sounds on particle effects in video games, how do you design ambiances, and then I moved to doing music implementation and working really closely with one of the music composers there. So just slowly over my 4 years there, I just got more and more exposure to learning how to craft audio for games. After 4 years there, I ended up at Microsoft for 7 years, and that was a very different kind of experience. Moving from a developer into more of a centralized audio team who was part of the publishing group. So we were working then with all kinds of external studios and getting a lot of different exposure to how people were making games, both first party and third party games. And after that, I went to Riot and got to work with Alison, which was really, really amazing. Riot, I can't say enough good things about how talented and amazing their audio team is there. I got to work on Legends of Runeterra, which just came out, which was their card game. Yeah, very proud of that team and really happy to have been a part of it. And now I'm currently at ParleyArc because I was interested in tackling something new that I had never done before. And I would almost say every one of my job changes has been because I've wanted to challenge myself in a space that I've never worked in before, and really about an interest in personal growth and going somewhere new to work with someone new who could teach me new things. So that's kind of what's led me to take the path that I've taken in my career. And I've participated in mentorship programs along the way. I've acted as again, I found a mentor outside of any kind of program, but I've also participated as a mentor in the game audio mentorship program that got started up by a bunch of people in the game audio community. That person I actually ended up hiring later at Riot, and now he works there as a full-time sound designer. So I can't say enough good things about mentorship programs and finding ways to interact with people that you really enjoy their work and learning, you know, as much as you can from different people. But that was my path. Everybody's path looks very, very different, and I think there's many different ways to get your foot in the door. So, yeah, excited to hear Alison's story.
Hello. Yeah, I think something definitely that you touched on, like the mentorship part, is so it's amazing to see how many people are just so willing to talk about their own experiences and give advice on all these things. And actually, Kristen, you were one of the first people that reached out to me when I joined Riot, and we just talked about everything, and that was awesome. And it wasn't necessarily like a focused meeting about anything in particular, but just about like how we got here and all that stuff. So it was really awesome just to see that open community. But yeah, anyway, I'll talk a little bit about how I got into the game industry. It is a little bit different. So I started out loving video games as a kid, and I grew up playing some music, but didn't really think that I would be a musician one day or anything like that. And I also didn't realize that, like a lot of people, that people made video games, and there were, excuse me, that there were people that worked on video games and could make it as a career. And then I played Silent Hill 3 and realized like there were behind the scenes videos of it where there were actors and there was composers and there were people who thought about how to make monsters, and like not just on the audio side, but on the visual side as well. And I'm like, oh man, yeah, someone made this video game for me. There must be people who do this for a living. So I started actually recording like voices in my closet with like a USB mic, and got really interested in like voice acting, and started doing like fan dubs online in online communities. And I got really into the voice acting scene online, but wasn't a really good actor. So I was like, I like this general thing, but I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be an actor. So, but I kind of just kept it as a hobby. Then I went to college, didn't know anything of what I wanted to do. So I went in as a communications major, and the people, my friends that I made in the dorm room were all very interested in film, and they always needed people to record audio and do like boom operating. And I was like, I guess I could do that. I like recording some stuff in my closet, so why not? And I ended up really, really loving it, and started doing post-production for some student films, and became a film major from there. So I focused a lot on like linear sound design, and interned at a few companies where I was able to, I interned at one company where there was a lot more focus on like on-set film, and then started interning at a company that was post-production for mainly commercials and documentaries. After graduation, I freelanced some more, and ended up actually getting hired by the person I interned at the post-production audio house at a new studio called Another Country Studios, which is part of this bigger post-production house in Chicago. And I learned so much there. There was a lot of working on commercials, but documentaries again, and like even some feature films. And it was just an awesome experience to see people recording and sound designing and mixing at a very fast pace, but also a very high quality pace. And that was like my first real experience with like professional audio and learning about the creative process. So I was there for 3 years, and then moved to LA. And that whole time I was playing this game called League of Legends, and I was like, I guess I'll apply there. I'll apply to Riot Games just for fun. There was only one job posting that was a senior sound mix or senior sound design position. And I was like, there's no way I can actually get a job at this position, but I'm gonna apply anyway. And I wrote a note that was like, I know I'm not fit for this position, but if you have any more associate or junior positions, please let me know. And then a couple months later, they actually emailed me back saying, there is an audio coordinator position open, would you be interested? So I was like, yes, I'm very interested, and decided to apply, and ended up getting the interviews, and got the job as the audio coordinator. So that was back in 2016, and I worked with Kristen and a bunch of amazing people. Brad Beaumont was my manager and became like a mentor for me to like really hone in my sound design, and I just learned so much from the whole team. So a couple of years later in 2018, I was able to transition into being a sound designer on League of Legends. And then last year, I was able to move from the League of Legends skins team, personalization team, to the Teamfight Tactics team. And since then, I've been able to work on the Teamfight Tactics mobile launch, and be able to move onto some other League of Legends like game mode type projects. So yeah, and that's where I am today.
That's awesome. I love to hear all the mentorship conversations, because I think that's been really beneficial, and I've seen so many great things come out of that. I think we're gonna pull some questions. So if you wouldn't mind, there is a question and answer section. So if you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A portion in Zoom. James had asked, do you know how one would go about searching for mentorship programs in game audio in your own city and area? Most internship companies offer are full for the foreseeable future. I do think internships can be difficult to find, but there are things out there where it doesn't necessarily have to be through a company. I would say any amount of experience you can get working with someone and learning as much as possible can be really beneficial. So again, the Game Audio Mentorship Program, which if you Google it, I think it's the main thing that comes up. We also sent out a list of resources that were available that I believe there's a link on there. And I can't say enough good things about that. I also think I've connected with people through the Game Audio Network Guild as well. I've also just randomly reached out to people on LinkedIn because I found that especially people that I've really loved their work and wanted to learn more, particularly on how they did certain things, people are really open in the community to being responsive. And I've even asked a few people, professionals in the industry that I wanted to work with, if they would be willing to even do one Skype call a month with me, just to have me ask questions and talk with me about their path and learn as much as I can from them. So I'm like, even if you can't find an internship in a company right off the bat, I would say there are other avenues to gaining the same types of information.
Awesome. Looks like the next one is from Quebe. I hope that's how you pronounce it. Would you recommend learning a programming language like C# or C++, even if you don't want to focus on audio programming? Yes, I think that's actually something that's really desirable from a lot of game companies. I think there are varying degrees of how much game companies actually need it on a day-to-day for, I think, a sound designer or an audio programmer. But having the vernacular to be able to discuss what you want, how you want it, or how something could be implemented in a game, I think is really valuable. I think it just like opens the horizons of, oh, I want this sound or this thing to be this way. I'm pretty sure we could solve it with this technique, even if you're not the most fluent or know exactly the code or the whatever the pipeline will be exactly. You're able to like kind of talk with the engineer or the audio programmer about it in a more in a better way, I guess. Like I think it all kind of depends on what the game is run on too. It like if they actually do rely a lot on C# or C++ knowledge, then I think it definitely gets people's eyes when you're like putting in your resume or trying to get a job out there. Yeah, I don't know if Kristen, did you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I've seen audio jobs where programming knowledge or scripting knowledge is not at all required. I do not actually have programming or scripting knowledge, but I will say that the more I work in different engines, if you work in, say, Unity, like C# is the primary language, or if you work in Unreal, like they have Blueprints, which is more of a visual scripting language. It's all kind of derived from the same foundation of programming in terms of the concepts, much like learning one DAW can translate to many DAWs. So if you have a good foundation for that knowledge, I think I agree with Alison's point of it helps you communicate and collaborate more with engineers. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. Next question we're going to pick up is from Eric, and it's how important is it to know the implementation software such as Wise these days? I would say at least through my career path, I've been heavily focused on implementation. I've worked in Wise on the majority of my projects, I would say. So I think it's pretty important, especially if you want to get into being more accessible to employers. I think they're gonna, like most game companies really do care that you have integration and implementation experience as well as being really good craftsperson. So there are a lot of educational resources out there. WISE themselves, Audiokinetic, has started offering certifications. I would say I even still have taken classes myself on Udemy, which I'm not sure we linked out, but they offer really cheap classes often with video sessions working through projects with an instructor. So I think things like that are really great and accessible. There's also a ton of just YouTube channels. There's a Facebook group that I'm a part of called Wise Witches and Wizards. They've been extremely helpful also in being kind of like a live sounding board if there are implementation questions or you get stuck, or Audiokinetic also releases free projects with Wise. So I think they have Cube project. They used to release Limbo's Wise project. So for anyone who's played through Limbo, you can go look at their actual Wise project. I don't know that they ship the actual assets, but you can at least see how the Wise project was set up, and maybe you can run the game and profile Wise, so you can see how the systems were working in the profiler. So there's so much information out there in so many ways that I think make learning Wise pretty accessible. Allison, did you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, it's more mainly just expanding a little bit on what you're talking about. I think game jams is also a really helpful opportunity to be able to use Wise. I think a lot of times it can be difficult to like just read something or like watch a tutorial on Wise, but it might not like soak in until you kind of do it and you're like, oh, okay, this is exactly what I do in my DAW, except now it's playing back this way because of this thing, this parameter, stuff like that. So I think, yeah, having that hands-on experience can really help a lot. And if there's any projects that you can find either in a game jam or like through the Wise free projects to actually get started on something like that, can definitely help. Cool. From Edwin, I want to get an internship for a game studio in the LA area, but the current situation makes that difficult. What advice do you have for a person trying to meet people and break into the industry during this time? So I think this one's kind of tricky in that I don't think anyone has gone through this exactly before, but I think some of the resources that Kristen has put together in there, it is super useful in terms of like just finding a community that is online. You don't necessarily have to meet these people face to face, and just like start like talking there, asking questions, getting to know people, and kind of just like networking with other people and like learning as much as you can, getting your name out there and having people just kind of recognize you in the communities can be really helpful to start and like build relationships with people. I think LinkedIn is also a super powerful place. I know I personally reached out to some people in LinkedIn, and actually like before I got my job at Riot, I reached out to one of the audio leads on LinkedIn, and he was super gracious and answered every single question I had in like paragraphs of detail. And I was like amazed by the fact that he even took the time to do that. But I think it did help me later on when I actually ended up applying, because they kind of recognized my name or were able to see that I was interested in Riot as a studio and also in audio. So yeah, I think just like asking questions or just trying to get your name out there, working on projects if you can with other people, can be super helpful in that way.
Yeah, I agree with Allison on that one. I think the indie scene is also a scene, you know, to Allison's point about game jams, like the indie scene is always looking for people. And if you're just looking to get experience and learn, I think people are also very open and receptive. Yeah. So next question is from Joe. most positions I've seen ask for previous work projects. How do you go about building a reel when you don't have any projects to answer on? I think this is a good one. One thing I've always done is when I was really early and looking for job positions and didn't have a ton of games, was you can always do redesigns on game trailers, on gameplay footage. A lot of people really care about seeing how you design audio content to picture. Another option I always like to throw out is Wise is free for anybody to download. You can also build demos in there and do recordings of yourself talking about why you would implement something a particular way. If you wanted to show more about your understanding of Wise, I always like to set up data structures and talk about the underlying system and why I would design things like that in Wise and the benefits of it. So I think that's a good way, even if you don't necessarily have a project you're working on. I would say things like Unity and Unreal, if you really care about getting in and you're taking classes, you're building little projects in Logic and you're learning how to hook up your own content. So you can also put together videos of the work you've done there to show like more of your like game engine side knowledge and experience. But in terms of just creating a sound design reel, I would say it's important to have stuff to picture. It's okay to do redesigns on other people's work, just like being upfront that that's what you're doing. But yeah, I don't know. Allison, do you have more to add to that one?
Yeah, I think like one thing that can also be helpful is I think having a flashy scene is great. Like having something that you can really show that you can do something different and really push things. But I think something that sometimes gets lost is designing something that has like gameplay aspects to it. Even if it's not something that you hooked up in Wise or Unity or Unreal or anything like that, having like choosing a scene that does have some like interactivity to it or feel like showing that you can design or think about an interactive experience in your reel, I think can help people kind of get their mind around the fact that you are also thinking about that aspect of it when you're designing, even if you don't have that experience quite yet, or even if you have some of that experience but not in a like a AAA game yet. So yeah, cool. So it looks like the next one's from Ashton. There's a lot of talk about inclusivity right now, which has been great to hear. What can we do as new faces in the game audio community to help this continue, even though we might not have as much influence industry-wide? I think this is a great question. I don't know if I necessarily have an answer to this directly, but I think something that I see a lot is there's just so many people out there, and like a lot of people who are very interested in audio in all sorts of ways, whether they're composer, actor, sound designer. And I think a lot of people are just unsure of like where to even begin. And they all come from all these different like countries and from different communities and stuff like that. And I think it's just like building a space for everybody and knowing like letting them know you're welcome here. We're here to have any like we're here to support you. We're here to answer your questions. Join our community. We don't want to like make anybody feel unwelcome, no matter where you're starting from or what you are hoping to do. I think it can be tough because sometimes you can see an industry and see the top people are sometimes very similar in demographic, but I think just keep kind of pushing through and showing that you are part of the community too, or like just being very open about your openness, I guess, to inclusivity. Yeah, I don't know. Kristen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, this has been an important topic as a person who identifies as a woman, as a queer woman. Um, it 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 definitely is an underrepresented gender in the games industry. And I think there's a lot of wonderful conversations happening in the world all around right now. But I think in terms of like, how do you contribute to this with maybe not having as much influence in the industry? I would say, at least for me, the best experiences I've had have been like more ground level forums. The Game Audio Network Guild has been putting together recent presentations where they've been inviting all different kinds of people to talk about their experience and navigating the game audio world, and hoping to driving more people to be interested in the game audio community, to create even more diversity. I think more and more companies are recognizing the value in having more diverse teams, that you get more creative, unique ideas. So I think it's such an important thing to participate in and to help promote as much as possible. And the best experiences I've had actually involve GDC roundtables. I know there is a cost to getting into GDC, and that also is a question unto itself of like, does that create barriers? But I think the roundtable formats in general allow everyone's story and voice to get a seat at the table. And I think that that kind of format really promotes it. Like, it doesn't matter if you haven't worked on you know, a million AAA games. Like, your experience is still very valid and your voice still is very critical in the conversation. And I think the more we can all sit down together and communicate and promote those types of conversations, like, the better off and more comfortable we'll all be continuing to have those conversations, and making the industry an even more open, accepting, and diverse place. Yeah. Thanks, though. That's a great question. I really appreciate that. Let's see. The next one is from Brianna. As an actor, I know efforts are super important for gaming roles and can be the X factor that books you a role. So things like the sound of you dying or weapon hits. We have any advice on how to get perfect at making those efforts, and how to differentiate getting a hit versus making a hit? Yeah, I think efforts are always really, really fun, and also hard, because it's also really hard on your, really hard on the voice. So I would say, first and foremost, the way I like to try and plan sessions is to do my lighter, quieter emotes up front, get those out of the way, so that when we then go to the more strenuous efforts like dying, hits, they're at the tail end of a session, and the voice is not really given out. I think it's also good to advocate for your own voice health. I would say, though, to get good at differentiating those, is I like to use a lot of vowel changes to get more variation and variety out of things that are more just emotive and generic. So for getting hit, like you know, and just going through the different vowel motions, because it creates a little bit more variety. I would say, if you're passionate and really interested in more creature vocalizations and emotes, like, that's always a much desired need for us sound designers, in being able to hire in voice talent who can create really interesting personality and characterizations with the voice. Hitting versus getting hit. I like to go to my like ha's and yah's, like for the act of hitting someone, and just it doesn't necessarily have to be that enunciation of it, but like changing like this type of sound that your voice is making can really make the difference between, is this painful or am I being more aggressive? um, I can't promote really hitting people. But yeah, I would say just playing around with different ways to use your voice to create different types of sounds, to make more variation, and thinking about, what does it mean to get hit? What's happening? Like, is my diaphragm contracting and all the air is getting knocked out of my voice, opposed to like, I actually have a lot of air and I'm emoting it based on my own choice. I think like even trying to figure out how to incorporate elements like that into your voice can really change the way emotes feel.
Yeah, I don't have too much effort experience, but I think something that the VO directors I've kind of worked with all seem to focus a lot on are also like how your eyebrows are expressing themselves in some ways, and how that can change your different ways that you are somehow having air escape from you. But I'm definitely not a professional actor or director, so I think they would probably be better at explaining what the differences were. But yeah, I think just kind of thinking about what your physical body would be doing in those moments can probably help get the different types of like grunt out there. Cool. Do you find studios prefer folks who have gone to specialized schools, or are they open to working with folks who are self-taught? I think that is something that really depends on where exactly you're applying. I don't think that self-taught people are, like, I think there are definitely people on the team who are self-taught and might not have had an audio experience in their background. But I do think a lot of companies or studios might get a lot of applications sometimes. So I think like specialized schools might be something that they, that might stand out to them a bit more. I think if you are self-taught, it would help to have a reel or a demo or any sort of experience that you've had working to show that even though you might have not have gone to a special school or gotten an audio degree or anything like that, that you are still capable of being able to do this and showing some of your chops, whether it is kind of like what Kristen was saying, where you were going and doing resounds for a game, or if you do have experience with game jams or any smaller projects like that. Yeah, anything to just kind of show like, even though I don't have this on paper, I do have experience or am able to still do the things that that a game studio would require.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I'm going to jump around a little bit because I find this one really relevant right now. And the question is from Jeff. Is remote work possible? I realize today the environment encourages a lot of online work, but I'm seeing quite a few companies want in-house employees. What's our take on regarding that? I think this is super interesting because I think in the world of a pandemic that we're having, it's really forced companies to look at what does remote work look like? Is it an option for us? And it's become really important to our own health and our own safety to be able to do that. So I think remote work is 100% possible. When I was working at Microsoft, the majority of the time working in publishing, I was working remote from the developers, even if I was still in-house at an office at Microsoft. When I worked at Riot, I was living in Seattle, and the core team office was in Santa Monica in California. So I'm a believer in remote work. I know there are other teams in the industry. I think the team that made Ori and the Blind Forest, I believe they're a bunch of like a a community of remote working, I believe. Distributed development is becoming more and more popular, where they have different people, different outsourcing groups, different teams kind of tackling different portions of the project from all over. I do think there's something really valuable about being in office and being able to have the walk-up desk conversations, and there are conversations that happen there that I think can be really important, especially for audio, to get more involved with the game teams and the development teams, to make sure that the holistic design and pipeline and process of building a game is really thinking about the audio experience too. But I think you're going to see more and more studios look at remote work and look at this time as being influential in helping push that process further.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like, especially now, it's because there were no other options. People have, and companies have really been like, well, we have to figure this out right now. We don't want to endanger people's lives, and I think a lot of companies have been pretty good about doing that. I think the post all of this happening world is still a little bit up in the air, so I don't know like what companies in general will be wanting to do, but I think it's definitely possible, and I think a lot of companies might be thinking about having that as an option in the future potentially, but who knows? It's a whole new world. What are some recommendations for those that are trying to branch into freelance game audio coming from a linear film background? I think what Kristen was saying before is actually super useful, and something that I think a lot of people told me when I first started, which was just actually getting a video game and doing the resounds for it. I think one thing you should always keep in mind is that the interactivity of a video game is very different from the one-shot sound of something that will happen when you're watching a film. So keeping that in mind, but don't try to like keep yourself from making the biggest explosion or making the coolest sound you can when you're doing these resounds. And then I think kind of moving backwards from there, like go crazy on your first one, your first pass of a resound, see what happens, and then kind of take it back from there and think, oh wait, well, if I was a player here, what sorts of, if I heard this every single time I shot my gun, would that be very fatiguing for you? Would the player be like, oh, this is too much every time, like this is too much, or would it be, is it a loop that sounds really great if you only hear it for 2 seconds, but if I heard it for 30 seconds or even for like the whole of your experience on that level or what have you, would that be irritating for them? Would they want to hear more? Would they just stuff like that? I think it's kind of tough because it's like you don't know until you really start putting into a game what it will sound like, but I think trying to start to think about those kinds of things and thinking about EQ and how things might pop with transients, or just experimenting and like playing around with resounding something, but also doing it in a way that would actually be gameplay and would actually be something that you could put into a game. And then also including like ambiences and all that other stuff in the process. So when you put it all together, you're like, okay, this is what it theoretically could be in a game altogether, even though it's in my DAW in a linear format. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but that's my general thoughts on that. Kristen, did you have any other thoughts?
I think you nailed it. I think it's to your point, it's really good to think about how in a linear fashion you can design something, you'll hear it once, and maybe that's true for a scripted moment in a video game, but then we have all these more what we call sandbox systems that are just built out of what is the player doing and a bucket of sounds that will be repeated many, many times. So it's like, how do you design content to feel not repetitive and stay interesting? Let's pull another question. What technology or equipment do you need to have to sound design for games? I would say, you know, it's interesting as a sound designer. I infinitely want to buy gear and equipment and plugins, but I have a problem. You don't need a lot, to be honest. Like, I think the first game I ever worked on, I made with Adobe Audition back in the 3.0 days, and a handheld MP3 recorder that was very cheap that you would occasionally hear the hard drive spin up on. Like, and I think actually a lot of Condemned was recorded with that, and a little Sony stereo microphone. For me, it's never been about, like, I of course want to go buy very expensive microphones and have amazing recording gear, but like, that's not what you need to necessarily start. Like, you can start with very little, and it can. I've always been a person who also likes to try and limit my toolbox and get just good with the things I have available to me. We worked on a Matrix Online game. I built, like, we built that game basically with the stock plugins that came in Adobe. We had zero purchasing for additional plugins. So I would say, as long as you have a way to hear your stuff, as long as you have a way to maybe capture and record stuff, like, just get out, experiment, learn how to get better at that, learn how to become a better field recordist, learn new techniques, and then learn with, like, what you have, and then expand upon that when you realize you're really limited and need to do something but don't necessarily have a way to do that. That's like how I've tried to tackle how I've approached, like, what are the things I need? Do I really need that extra plugin that I'm about to buy? Probably not, but I'm probably going to buy it because, again, I have a problem.
And then you get to play with so many toys. Yeah, I think what Kristen said is, like, completely accurate. It's like there's so many different plugins that are very similar and can do the same thing. And sometimes you can, if you just strip down to, like, one delay or one reverb and see what you can do with it, it's amazing how much you can push that and really design something really out there. Actually, something that a couple of people at Riot had ideas about was, like, why don't we try to just, like, design around white noise? And I think one of them's in here. Oscar is somewhere around here. He loves to just go in and take a simple sound, like I don't know, like a pan being hit, and then he just goes in and, like, puts 30 plugins on it and goes crazy. And it doesn't even matter sometimes what the original sound is. It's just the combinations of different plugins that he kind of puts together, makes it sound a little bit weird and quirky. So I think it's all about just playing around with something. Like, also recording your own stuff can be super inspiring, because you can find, even though, like, it might sound like another door, you know that you recorded that door and you remember that door characteristic, and you might use that door forever and everything, because you know the intricacies of the frequencies and how it hits and all that stuff. And then you put that through a bunch of different plugin chains, and then all of a sudden you have your own unique door and you have your own unique creature vocal or something like that. So yeah, I think it's just kind of experimenting and playing around.
I would also, one more thing, not to interrupt, I apologize. There's, like, communities of sound people out there that are really passionate about field recording and who have started, like group source libraries, where it's really just a collective of sound designers going out, and they'll pick a theme. Maybe it's doors, maybe it's creatures, maybe it's drags, or, like, dropping objects or breaking them, and they'll put, like, everybody's going to go record this week, bring it back, share it amongst each other. And so then you're building, like, this collective and community around helping each other get better and really working together. And I've been a huge advocate for participating in things like that, because you're then constantly like doing the thing that you love to do, as well as benefiting from, yeah, Isaac, I think, posted in the chat a link to one of our group source library groups. So it's been amazing, because I remember when that group started with like 5 people, and now there are sound designers from all over the world participating. So I think even if you spun up your own, whether you join one, just being a part of a community that is involved in and doing the thing you love to do, and like just all want to work together and are just trying to get better themselves, like it's amazing. And you get a bunch of recordings out of it, so win-win. Let's see, jumping around a couple of questions. I'm gonna get how do you think the broader game audio community can improve and evolve mentorship? I think this is really interesting. I think I would love to participate and mentor a ton. I think we have recently seen an influx in improving the mentorship programs that are available out there, because of the game audio mentorship program spooling up and them really having a format. I see a lot of mentorship programs kind of fall apart because there isn't really a defined, clear structure in what the mentorship program should be, how it should operate, the expectations around how what are the expectations on each individual, because I think a lot is uh, the person who wants to be involved in a mentorship program should be a really active participant, in my opinion. Like you know best what you want to learn, you know best in how to get what you want out of your mentorship. So by being really involved in the things you want to know and laying that out up front, I think we as a community can get better around defining what those expectations are, and so that then we could have even more successful mentorship programs. I think also having really more accessible ways to one another that doesn't cost money, because I think like a lot of the conferences are really amazing, and I wouldn't give them up for the world, because I love going to them and the networking and the amount of education I get out of them. But I do think that's an additional potential barrier for people trying to get in, that maybe can't get accessibility in the same ways. So I think there's room for ways we can connect. I think things like LinkedIn are great because you can, but not everyone's super active, so it's always kind of hit and miss. But I would say getting more structure and setting up expectations would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think the audio community is actually really great about doing this already, but something that kind of surprised me when I first really started working with other people was how open people were to their techniques. Because I think sometimes people can get really bogged down with freelance mentality of you are competing with other people for jobs, which is completely fair. You don't want to do too much for someone where you're like, okay, now they're taking all my jobs, sort of thing, and now I make no money. But I think something that has been really awesome and I would love to see continue and evolve is how open people are of you liked the sound that I did, or you like this sound design thing. Let me break it down for you, what plug-in chains there were, what my mentality was. And I found a lot of people to be very, very open about that in my circles of the game audio community. And I hope that continues, because I think it just levels everybody up. You're making everybody start at a better baseline, and that way we can all benefit from that and be able to help each other make game audio even better and even more accessible and easier to start. Cool. What are some things you recommend someone do to hone their sound design skills while they're applying to jobs? I think trying to diversify what you work on can help a lot. If there's creature vocals that you've never done before, or if you're always doing like really big flashy scenes, maybe trying something that's a little bit quieter, or yeah, just kind of showing that you have different aspects to how you work. I think everybody has their strengths of like what they're good at. Some people are maybe really great at synthesis. Some people are really good at field recording and being able to really edit their recordings or even library sounds. I think just finding something that you are good at, but then trying to show that you also are able to do other facets of it, and presenting that in a reel for an employer can really help show like, okay, so he's strong, or he or she is stronger at that. Maybe they can also do this other thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Really like pushing your genre too. I always find that there's still areas I've not had an opportunity to sound design, and if you threw me on a sci-fi game, I might be way more lost than if you put me on a card game with a lot of magical sounds, right? Like, because I just learned how to build that, right? So I think if you want to really get better and practice, like I would say those redesigns are great. Pick a genre you haven't worked in, really push yourself for like, okay, well, how would I build source for this? If I'm going to work on something really cartoony, how do I make cartoon sounds? You know, sci-fi sounds, fantastical magic sounds. Like, there's so many different genres. Or I want to make a modernized retro feel. Like, how do you create that sound style, and just really break down? Maybe go find other reference material for things that you want to emulate, or like a sound style you think is really great. Try and break down how do you do that? What do you think they did? Maybe even reach out to some of those people to say how much you love this and ask them some questions to get some tips on how to do that stuff. Not everyone will always respond, but I will say that the game audio community I've witnessed is really accepting and really open, and most people just want to help lift everybody up around them, because it's been a pretty amazing community for me. What is the most valuable thing a sound designer could add to their portfolio to show a potential employer that they're a good hire? Again, I think the things we're talking about, like variety of skill set, in what specifically are they looking for? Are they looking for a jack of all trades who could do implementation, content? But I also think, like, do they have a particular sound or style they're looking for? Because I think those things really matter, and it's hard to know what someone is looking for. I also sometimes like ask in sound tests, like, is there a particular style that you would like trying to get as much information as possible up front about things like that. Again, I think implementation skill sets are really critical. I don't know that everybody always has a good way to show that stuff on their reel. So by providing that and figuring out a way to present that for yourself, like I think that also is really helpful and might help set you apart from a lot of just the sound reels that people get. Do you have any additions you'd add to that, Allison?
No, I actually think that was an awesome answer. Yeah, I agree pretty much with everything that you said. Cool. I think we're wrapping up on time, so maybe I'll sneak one last question in. Let's see. How would you recommend navigating the current job market, which requires more and more mid and senior level experience? With such a few entry-level opportunities, there seems to be a higher bar of entry. I think that's a great question, and it is something that not just in the audio industry, I think across all industries, there seems to be like oh, here's a mid-level position, 5 years experience. I think it's just kind of like we were touching on before, just networking, getting your name out there, asking questions from people, having people just know who you are, or like know that you're interested in something like that, can really help you start to form connections and show them that like, oh, I may not have the experience right now, but I want to be a part of this community, and I want to be a part of this industry. That can help a lot in just getting your foot in the door and finding people who can help you like level up to a position where you could potentially get into a job. I think it really is tough though, because it seems really daunting to just message someone out of the blue and hope that they respond. But I think there are a lot of people who are willing to talk. I think finding smaller companies can help sometimes too, like finding people who it maybe is a one-person team, or have worked on a lot of things, but maybe they don't necessarily work on this AAA studio or something like that. I think those types of people are also super open and wanting to help and wanting to be part of the community. So I think just kind of reaching out and keep plugging away at it and hoping that you are able to get the reply back.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. I also think it can be really scary to put yourself out there. But I would say, like, most people are good intentioned, and want to be helpful. So if you find someone and you'd love feedback, the more you show like you're doing redesigns and you would just love feedback from someone, like I'm always happy to listen to people's work and help give feedback, and hopefully hopefully there are people accessible. The more you put yourself out there, the more people are going to, again, see your passion, see your love, and how dedicated you are to wanting to break into the industry. And they're going to think of you then when they have opportunities available. So I would just say being an active part of the community, being involved, all of that is very helpful to being able to continue down a path of game audio. A game audio career, yeah. Do we have time for one more, or are we out? We're out.
I'm down to answer. Oh, it says do it. All right, we have time.
Okay, great. All right. You want to grab the next one?
Sure. Let's see. How much synth knowledge versus recording and audio editing knowledge do you think it's recommended or needed with becoming a sound designer? I think I think it's just different things in your toolbox, and kind of dependent on what you are applying for. If you are applying for a more modern game or a very sci-fi heavy game, I think having a lot of synth knowledge is super helpful, because then you are able to design more things that feel a little bit more unique to that genre, and that fits in that environment. But synth knowledge can also be super useful for any genre. Like it can be magical, it can be anything that you want it to be. It's kind of just more how you use it in a way. I think having the ability and knowing a little bit of everything is super helpful, so that you know what's possible and what you can even do. But I don't think you need to necessarily be like 100% the best synth person, 100% the best field recordist, know every single sound library out there. I think it's just different levers that you can pull to be a sound designer, and continually growing, knowing where your weak spots are and admitting that, and asking for help when you want it or need it, and just constantly growing and constantly learning new things.
Nice. Let's see, got a question from Allison. As a sound designer, what are some of the qualities or skills that you'd like to see on a recent college grad or intern, other than your typical sound design skills or techniques? For me, communication, data organization, we have so many assets in video games. I can't tell you the number of spreadsheets that I've built and status trackers and things of that nature. So being really organized, being a good communicator and a good, yeah, so many spreadsheets. Being a good communicator, being really open to feedback and being patient with other people. I think the amount of feedback, sometimes we can take those things personally, right? Like you put a lot of effort and yourself into your art and your craft, and I think that's amazing. But I think being able to take critical feedback and use it as a tool and understand how to sift feedback and when to apply it, and how to take criticism, I think is, and not have it be personal is really important. I also think knowing how to give critical feedback that doesn't become personal, like that is a skill too, to be able to provide good feedback on other people's work in a way that they're very receptive, and it doesn't, that it feels like everybody wants the same thing and everybody just wants to make great sounding games. That's also a great skill that I really look for. You have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think other than that, just any way that you can show your passion for something can be super, super infectious. And I think being able to see like, oh, this person wants this, really, really wants this, and like they know going in that they might have some holes in their knowledge or in what they're trying to do, but if they're very obvious about their growth, that can be so useful and refreshing to a role into a new position. So I think that can also help a lot in making you stand out among the applications that are out there. How important is location in terms of getting into the industry? This one I actually don't know too much about, since I did end up moving to LA. I know that there are some different companies out there. I know there's like a big scene in Vancouver, obviously Seattle, and Texas, but I think it all depends on what you're looking for and what you want to do. I know a lot of AAA studios are out in LA, so yeah, I think it all kind of just depends on the job and the company that you're looking to go for.
I also have been in a like game, what I would consider a game tech hub city. So I know that I have had friends who've lived in the Midwest and had games jobs, or lived on the East Coast. So I know it's possible. I'm sure it makes life maybe more harder, because I know a lot of companies do, again, to the point of people like to hire in-house when they are hiring. With that said, who knows how the world, like how we're evolving, and maybe that will become less of a gated issue and become more flexible. I would hope, because I do think there's something to be said for being able to live in cheaper cities, and still have access to getting to work on games and good jobs. And like, it's just gonna, the more flexible we as a games industry can become, I think the more access we'll have to, but like more talent. So I would be pro that. Let's see. Alex says, my biggest issue is being seen by companies when I'm sending applications. Do you have advice on some of the best practices to help you stand out? I agree. Like, I've applied for jobs and also felt like my resume kind of disappeared into the ether, right? I think if you can have a portfolio that helps you stand out, I think the more active you are in the community, the more awareness people will have, and maybe even the more you can let people know you've applied for certain positions. But I do think, you know, I've seen people get hired on blind applications into companies. So I do think it's just that and as a person who's built a team and hired, you get an influx of a lot of resumes. So I can understand, even if there is an amazing one, like it's still hard to sift through all the resumes that come in. So I think that, again, the more you can like build your own community and let people know when you're going for jobs and putting yourself out there and get people interested in you. I've literally seen people get positions off of participating in the Game Audio Network Guild's demo derbies. Like they put on every year at the Game Developers Conference, GDC, they do a like sound design demo derby where a bunch of participants will do a redesign. They'll present it in front of a group of professionals and get critiques back and get feedback on their piece. And I've seen people like literally go sit in the audience for those just to look for new talent and look for potential like people to bring in as contractors or like fresh sound design skills.
Awesome. From Vitali, I hope I pronounced that right. I'm 38. Is there any restrictions for age restrictions for application for junior or assistant roles in sound design for games? Is it too challenging without having some proper degree in the audio field? I have already about 10 years working experience in game industry, mostly on AAA projects, but as animator, technical artist, and environment artist. Sound and music were just my really serious hobby all this time, and now I've decided to try to do it professionally. Thank you. That's awesome. I think that's a really great thing that you're trying, and super like brave of you to like just decide now, like this is now what I want to do and go into. I don't think there's age restrictions necessarily. I think it's it does boil down to your experience with things and having a solid reel and having a solid want for growth and setting that expectation with the employer. Because obviously if you do have 10 years in one field and then if you are applying for a more junior role, setting the expectation for salary or for your personal growth plan is probably different than someone who maybe did just graduate or this may be their first position. That said, I think like having that experience working in the industry is super amazing because then you are able to speak the language, talk the talk with other people, especially since you do have so much experience in all these other fields. I think that the team around you will probably be like, oh, that's great. This person actually knows what splining means or like how to rig something or what they want and how it works. So I don't think it's necessarily anything that is a hurdle. It's more just how you approach it and what kind of expectations you and the company have of you.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. There's your experience is already very valuable in understanding how to make games. And it's that expectation setting. I've watched a few sound people. I've watched people come from QA into sound design positions. That happened when I was working on a game at Insomniac. They had hired this amazing, talented sound designer, but who had just ended up being their audio tester. I've watched audio people go into game design paths, creative director paths, producer paths. So I do think there's totally room to navigate jumping around to different kind of disciplines and positions. And 38 feels still young, so so I would hope so. Let's see. There's a question around, do we think it's possible to get an internship or career sound design without attending traditional college or a sound design program? I would say 100% yes. I've seen it. I do think what traditional education gives you is maybe just a path to getting a really like strong foundation of knowledge. But but there are other ways to get that foundation of knowledge. So I wouldn't say that is a limitation. I've seen tons of people get into the games industry without traditional degrees.
How would you transition careers to a sound designer if you haven't worked in the game industry without outright quitting your current employment? All right, last question, I promise. I think that can be difficult to really balance your personal life and your work life and now your transitioning work life. I think for me, I was kind of lucky in that I did get a full-time position shortly after freelancing. But I think it's kind of just feeling out what opportunities you're getting, exploring your passion and doing things in your free time and just kind of figuring that stuff out. And then slowly kind of trying to go for the positions that that you feel like you can do. Like if it's a small job on like a freelance website, if it's helping some friend on their project, their film, their game, their whatever they're looking to do. And then seeing if there are more and more opportunities like that for you before kind of like fully jumping in. I think it's kind of just a personal experience that you have to go through in seeing what works for you and what works for your lifestyle and what responsibilities you have. Like if you need to pay rent and you need a certain amount of income, then it might be that you do it on the side and hone your skills more before trying to get that first job or even trying to get a freelance gig.
That's really great. I think we're going to start wrapping it up. I just want to say thanks everyone for coming out and participating. I do apologize we didn't get through all the questions, so you know, feel free to send me invitations on LinkedIn. Like I'm always happy to try and connect with anyone. If you have stuff you'd love feedback on, like I'm always happy to take a listen. And I just want to say thanks for showing up and being a part of the community, because it's really great to have everybody here.
Yeah, thank you all. You've been so awesome and welcoming. Like I'm really blown away by all the amazing support out there. You all are awesome. Cool. All right, I guess we end this.
All right.
Okay, cool. I was like, I don't know how to end it. Hopefully someone else is ending it. Cool.
All right. It's lunchtime.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Alison.
Smelling food.
So
Thanks,
awesome.
Kristen. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Help.
Bye. Help Network.